In this exercise, we will continue to work with patterns. We're going to create a reusable 3-column block that we can use for a variety of elements within our website. Let's jump in and see how we can do this. What I'd like to do is on my homepage at the large screen size is I want to format this page. And obviously I have some placeholder elements, so I'm going to need to make these elements active links. But before we do that, I want to create some columns for portions of this page. Because I'm going to want to repurpose some of these layouts on other pages, it probably makes the most sense to create these different elements as patterns. So I'm going to go into my editor, I'll go to patterns, we'll go ahead and create a new pattern. I'm going to click add pattern, and we'll start off by making the 2-column layout. I'm going to unsync this so I can modify the text. And this is going to be fairly simple. We are going to begin by creating a group. The reason I'm creating a group is because I want to ensure that the content does not span the entire width. Inside of this group, we'll create a column, and we're just going to do a 50-50 split. So as you can see, I have 2 columns. Let's open list view so this is a little bit easier to visualize. I generally like to put something in my columns, even if I'm going to replace it with other content. So I'm just going to create a paragraph, and we'll just put column 1 content here. Then I'll duplicate that paragraph and we'll drag it into the second column, and we'll just change it so it says column 2 content here. I will select the overarching column wrapper, and I'm going to ensure that Stack on Mobile is selected. I'll go to Styles, and we're just going to add some padding. So I'm going to add padding of medium on the top and the bottom, and we'll add padding of small on the right and the left. And then I'm going to go to my block spacing, and in between the columns, I want to create a little bit of gutter spacing. Now that I have that, I'm going to save this. I'll go back out to WordPress, and before I use this, I'm just going to create my 3-column layout as well. So I'll do something very similar. I'm going to add a new pattern. We'll call this 3-col layout. Once again, I do not want this to be synced, and I'm going to click add, and we'll start off by doing the same sort of thing. We're going to add a group. Then I'm going to create columns inside of the group. This time we're going to create 3 equally spaced columns. I'll go to list view. Let's add a paragraph, and we'll just identify this as column 1 content. Once again, I will duplicate this, and I'll just do that twice, and we'll drag these paragraphs into the additional columns. And then I'm just going to update the text so that it says column 2 content, column 3 content. Now with the wrapping column element selected, I'll go into styles, and we're going to go ahead and set padding to be medium on the top and the bottom. We'll set it to be small for the right and the left, and our block spacing on the right and the left is going to be small as well. I will save this. Now that we have these 2 different column layouts, we're ready to modify our homepage. But before I jump in and do that, I do want to show you one thing. You'll notice on my homepage, all of our main content is centered, and it only gets so wide. If you recall, when we first made our pages template, we went ahead and created a group, and inside of the group, we placed the content block. The group is going to restrict this content from getting as wide as it possibly can be. But because what I want to do here is I want 1 or 2 sections of my page to actually be able to span the entire width, possibly with a background color or something just to make this content stand out, we're going to have to create a new template that we can just use in special cases. So what I'll do is I'll come back out to my template area. I'm going to create a new template, and we're going to create a custom template. I'm going to give this a template name of full width. Then I'll click create. We're going to base it off of our existing content. So we have a header. the cover image and our footer. And then here is our group. This contains the page content. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to select this group and we're going to uncheck inner blocks use content width. This will ensure that this group now is going to span the entire width. I'll go ahead and save this. And now you can see if we go out to templates, we have a new full width template. I'm going to go into the page portion of my WordPress website and I'm going to go into my home page. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the template that the home page is using. We'll click where it says pages and we're going to change the template and we're going to use our full width template. So now that I have full width, if we go ahead and save this page and we refresh this page in the browser, you can see that the content is now taking up the full width. Now that we have that in here, we're going to go into list view and we're going to create some groups here so that we can control what part of the content is full width and what part is more restricted. I'll create a group before everything within my content block. I'm just going to create a one column group like so, and by default, this is using inner blocks use content width. Then we're just going to move the things that we want to appear inside of this group into the group element. So I'm going to select the first two headlines and the first two paragraphs, and we'll drag these into the group. Then we're going to take this what we're all about and the paragraph and the list, and this is the thing that we're going to wrap inside of a group that will take up the full width. I'll click the three dots. I'm going to click add before, and once again, I'm going to create a group. We'll create a one column group, but this time we're going to uncheck inner blocks use content width. This should ensure that this area is going to span the entire width. It is worth mentioning that sometimes these things don't always preview inside of WordPress, so do keep that in mind. But if we save this, we should see that this will span the entire width. With this group selected, I'm going to go to Styles, and we're going to change the background color, and we'll make the background color our teal color. Now that I have that here, I'm going to create another group inside of this area. This group is going to respect the content width, so we'll leave this slider checked. Now that I have that, I'm going to grab the elements that I want to place inside the second grouped item, and let's go ahead and select these elements and change the text color. We'll use our cream colored for all of the text. I'm going to select my header and we're going to go ahead and text align center. And with this inner group selected, I'm going to go to styles. We'll add some padding. I'll make it medium on the top and the bottom, and we'll add small on the right and the left. Let's save this. And if we come back out to the front end and refresh, you will see that this green area now spans the entire width, but the content is going to stay somewhat restricted. And actually, let's go ahead and just leave this text as left aligned. I ultimately would probably want this to be all center aligned, but I don't like the way that unordered lists look when they are center aligned. I think it looks weird because they don't have a nice left alignment. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to use our 3-column layout for these 3 sections. So let's go ahead and insert our pattern. I'm going to click the plus sign. We'll go to patterns, my patterns, and I'm going to get my 3-column layout. I will just drag this underneath our full screen bar, and you can see here is our 3 columns. Now that I have this, I'm going to go back to list view, and we are going to move the elements that we want to appear within the columns into the various columns. So I'm going to insert featured this week into column 1. And I do want to insert blog posts here. In order to insert the blog posts, we're going to change this to be a query loop. So let's get rid of this paragraph. Let's change this to a query loop. I'm going to start blank, and all we're going to do here is just show the date and the title. As you can see, it's going to list all of my posts. I only want to list a few posts. What we'll do is we'll select the query loop. I'm going to open the sidebar, and we are going to go ahead and go to filters, and we are going to filter by taxonomies. And then as you can see, we can pick either categories or tags. Let's go ahead and just use our tips category. And then I'm only going to show 2. And because it's showing the most recent posts, those are the only ones that will appear. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the pagination. So I'll open query loop, and we're just going to delete pagination, and we're going to delete no results. So this is simply going to show our 2 most recent tips blog posts. I will also select a date. Let's go into styles. I'm going to make sure that the padding on the top and the bottom and the margin on the top and the bottom is set to none. I'm going to change my text to be a slightly lighter shade of gray. And I'm going to change my typography to be a italic light. And then let's change the font size to be small. Then I'll select the title. And just to snug these things up, I'm going to go back into styles and make sure that my padding on the top and the bottom is 0, and then margin on the bottom and top are also 0. So that takes care of our first column. In the second column, we're going to have this join the bloom list. So this element goes into my second column. And I also want to bring in this paragraph right here. Instead of having subscribe now, I'm going to add my custom block, which allows the user to sign up for our newsletter. So we made that in an earlier exercise, and you can see that this is going to show up here. We'll have to look and see how our subscribe button looks. We might need to modify this slightly. And then finally, our most loved recipes is going to go into the third column. So here is our third column, and let me just get rid of the default paragraph that I had in the first column. I'll do the same thing in the third column. We'll delete that. And then we're going to drag in most loved recipes, and we're going to drag in a list. These lists just need to link to the appropriate posts. And I'm just going to make sure that my headings match. So this is an H2. I'm going to switch this to an H3. This is already an H3, and featured this week is also an H2. So let's make this an H3. And for some reason, this is not bold, so I'm just going to make it bold so that these things all match up. I do not need the browse all recipes. Let's save our page, and let's take a look in the front end. So as you can see, we have our 3 columns. These titles are way too big, and they're also not links, so let's go ahead and fix that. I think the join the bloom looks okay, but let me just look at my page at a smaller size. You can see that this starts to get a little bit wonky, so we'll need to adjust that, and we'll probably need to use some custom CSS just to get this to break onto 2 lines sooner. So we'll modify that in that way, but let's fix this first, and then we need to deal with the bottom portion of our page. I'm going to select my titles, and currently these are H2s. I'm just going to make these into H3s. And let's make sure that the title is a link to the actual post. Since these blog posts are similar to what I have here, this may not be completely necessary. So I think I'll just eliminate these elements. And then the final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do something similar to what I did here. This Let's Grow and encouraging people to visit our social media is going to appear inside of a block, just like we did up here. So let's go ahead and let's create a group. I'll select the 3 dots and group these together. This needs to be nested inside of another group. And for the parent group, I'll change inner blocks use content width to be off. I'm going to go to my styles. I'm going to change the background color. Let's use our midnight blue. I'm going to change the text color to be our light gray. And I'm going to want to do that for the heading as well. For these 2 elements, I will center align them. And then I'm going to select the inner group and we'll add some padding. We'll set it to be medium for the top and the bottom, small for the right and the left. And I'm just going to leave this Instagram and Pinterest here because ultimately I'm going to use an icon to populate this text. Let's save this and let's look at it in the front end. And as you can see, this is what our page looks like. So we've kind of made some modifications and altered that page. There are a few things that I just want to point out and adjust. One thing that I've noticed is that the font size of my post titles is a little too large, so we'll make that smaller. And then if we resize our page, you can see that at certain points, the newsletter sign up starts to get weird. Because I only want to affect this one instance and not the other place where we're using the newsletter sign up form, I'm going to assign a class inside of WordPress. So on my page right here, I'm going to go into this column. We'll give this a class of inline newsletter sign up. And the other thing that I'm going to do is, even though this looks okay in WordPress, we know that these are a little too large. So let's just change these to H4s. It should change both of them since they're part of our query loop. And if we save now and go back out to the front end and refresh, you can see that this text size is much better. When the page is resized, you can see that our newsletter email sign up starts to get a little bit wonky. So what we will do is at the mid-screen size, we're going to have this stack vertically. We know it looks fine at the large screen size, but our mid-screen size is when this starts to get somewhat problematic. So we're going to need to figure out when we want that to happen. And it looks like we could probably have it stack vertically around 950 pixels. And then when our page gets smaller and it changes to a one column layout, you can see that we have a little bit of awkward indentation here. And I believe this is because initially we had used a justify content of center. So we're probably going to want to get rid of that in this particular instance. So let's go into our custom CSS and take care of these things. Inside of my CSS, I'm just going to add these rules before we have our media query. We'll go ahead and we'll use our custom class of inline newsletter sign up so we can specifically just target this instance of the newsletter form. And we're going to go ahead and tell this to use a justify content of flex start. That should prevent the form element from being centered at that small screen size. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to target the individual input elements, and we're going to use attribute selectors so we can just get the email input, and we'll go ahead and use a group selector here. I'll just copy this selector and we'll paste this in on the other line, and we'll change this to a button with a type of submit. This will ensure that I'm just going to target these two elements. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to change the display to block. Let's go ahead and save this. If we come back to the front end and we refresh our page, you can see that this is now resolved. However, I'm not seeing these elements stack, and the block probably isn't working because the parent element is using flex. That is our form element right here. And actually at the small screen size, this is fine. So we probably only want to change this when our page switches to display these things in two columns. So that appears to be happening right around 780. So between 780 and 950, let's go ahead and target the form element, and we're going to have the flex direction be column. So instead of having this, let's go ahead and just get the form element itself. We'll use a flex direction of column. And because I want to ensure that this only occurs in between our 782 and 950, we need to wrap this inside of a media query. So I'm going to make a media query for min width of 782 and a maximum width of 950. And then we'll go ahead and add this rule, and somehow I have an extra parenthesis. Oh, here's my parenthesis right here. Let's make sure that's coded correctly so everything works. And I'm just going to indent this so it's a little bit easier to see. Let's save this and see if this took care of the issue. If we refresh now, I am in between 782 and 950, and you can see that this stacks vertically on top of each other. That looks much better. We probably can also get rid of the align items center. I think that'll look better. So we'll go ahead and eliminate that as well. Let's make sure it goes back to the horizontal layout when it's over 950, and it does. So let's just take care of that align items inside this same media query. I'll use align items, and we'll just set this to stretch, which is the default behavior. So once again, let me just check that out. We'll refresh our page. If it's less than 950, you can see that it does switch to being stacked, and that will persist until we get under our 782, and then it's going to appear side by side. So that looks much better. Let's move on to the next step. If we visit our contact page, at the top of the page, I would like to create multiple columns for email, social media, and collaborations and partnerships. So let's go ahead and go to our contact page. I will hit the plus sign. I'm going to go to patterns. We'll select our 3-column layout, and we're just going to drag this underneath how to reach us. And then I can come into list view, and I can simply grab the elements that I want to place inside of these columns. So let me get rid of my placeholder, and then I'm going to grab this paragraph block right here. This is going to go inside of my first column. My second column will get rid of the placeholder, and we're going to get this social media and the list. These are going to appear in the second column. And then the third column is going to contain this collaboration paragraph. So I'll place that in the third column and delete that placeholder column. Let's save this. And if we look at this in the front end, you can see that these now appear in 3 columns. If we resize our page, this will eventually go to just being stacked, which is how we want this to work. We do have some other things that we're going to do, which we will tackle in our next upcoming movies. But hopefully this gave you some ideas about how you can easily repurpose patterns so that you can make building your website easier and keep everything more consistent.